So here we have another one of my minimalist out the front card wallets. The pattern for this is available online. Here I'm doing the personalisation for the customer and using the laser to do the outline of the cut, which I will then cut by hand and glue together. Just looking at some of the tools I'll be using for this project. We have a rotary cutter because this is a thin leather that I'm using. We have some thread snips. We have my thread zap 2. There's a video for this linked below. Some wing dividers, put my stitch line on. Some harness needles, we use 2 of them on the thread. And of course some thread. This is a waxed braided thread, and you can use some beeswax if you're using unwaxed thread. The stitching chisels I shall be using for this are the KS Blade Punch 3.85. I have a flat-faced cobbler's hammer. I'll show you what this is for near the end of the video. My Barry King striking maul. My pulling block. And of course some leather. This is a chrome tanned pre-finished leather. Here I'm going to be using a granite slab with a poundo board on top. This is just to protect the work surface underneath. The poundo board is great for hammering into as it protects the blades, the edges of your stitching chisels. As you can see, I've been using this for quite a long time and there are lots of holes in this one. I'm going to start off by lining my larger stitching chisel up on the sewing lines that I've made, and I'm going to hammer through with my maul. What I'll do at the end of the piece of leather is hang one tooth over the end, over the edge, which means I know that it's a nice even spacing all the way from the end of the piece into the first hole. What we want to do is make sure the stitching chisels go all the way through all the teeth, nice and evenly through all of the leather. Then I'm going to use my pulling block to slide the leather off of the chisel. You don't want to wiggle it back and forth as it can distort the stitching holes. By placing the first 2 teeth into the previous holes, I can make sure that it is lined up nicely and it's an even spread of holes along all of the stitching holes that I make. By using the 2-prong chisel, essentially I'm doing one hole at a time to make sure I can get around the curve, keeping the spacing between the holes even. Although this is a pre-waxed thread, I'll just show you how to wax your thread. So squeeze the thread between your thumb and the wax and just pull it through with a medium amount of pressure. Here is one of my favourite tricks when it comes to threading a needle for hand sewing, and that is to cut the thread on a slight angle. As this is a flat waxed braided nylon, it makes it much easier for locking your needle in. Here we can see if you don't cut your thread on an angle, it is slightly more difficult and it can fray the end of your thread. And when we say locking the needle, it means pushing the blunt tip of the needle through the tail of your thread and then sliding it down all the way over the body, past the eye of the needle and down the thread itself. This removes any bulk of knots which can get stuck in the holes. Here I'm just going to do a traditional saddle stitch. So I'm just going to do one back stitch on here and then stitch down and round. I'm going to speed this up because nobody really wants to watch me doing 10 minutes of hand sewing. The piece of equipment that is holding the leatherwork in place is known as a stitching pony or a stitching horse. There's a video on the benefits of these which I shall link below. So here we have the flat-faced cobbler's hammer. As we can see, the stitching is nice and even, but is slightly raised. So what we're going to do is gently tap this down with a hammer. We do this on the front and the back to even the stitching out, and the reason we use the flat-faced hammer is to reduce any risk of damaging the leather. And there we have the 3-pocket out the front minimalist card wallet. If you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more leatherworking tips, tricks and build alongs, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to be notified when new videos go live.